What's good, party people? This is According to Woods with a bit of a somber tone to the podcast because this week the wrestling world lost a pretty pivotal figure in terms of historical sense, as well as just a fan favorite in Scott Hall, better known as Razor Ramon in some circles. But uh, I thought it was apropos. We're not doing After 83 Weeks this week with Eric Bischoff, but we have the crew from After 83 Weeks, George Ramosa, Steve Kaufman, and the incomparable Christy Olson. And one would argue if Scott Hall didn't show up on Nitro many moons ago, maybe there wouldn't be an 83 weeks where WCW kicked WWF's ass. One, but also there wouldn't be companion podcasts because of the subject. So Scott Hall, pivotal member of the wrestling history.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's so true. I hadn't thought of it that way.
Yeah,
I couldn't agree more. I also think I don't know if you would see someone like Steve Austin making the millions he made on merch if someone like Scott Hall and Kevin Nash didn't take the stand when they did and left for more money. Because I've heard a lot of interviews these last couple weeks with both Kevin Nash and with Scott Hall, and WWF at that time didn't give guarantees. They like in a way that, like, because Arn Anderson tells a story where they gave him a loose guarantee, but then he wasn't making it, and then he complained and ultimately quit. But wouldn't you know, he made his guarantee right before he quit. And the WWF really had those fanciful numbers, and everybody needs to come to us. And I must say, like, collective bargaining, like, as a guy from a union town, I think Scott Hall and Kevin Nash and that movement really got the boys paid in the TV era.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. George, you have some, kind of historical. Like, when did you discover Scott Hall?
1991, 92, when I first got cable, and I mean, I knew that other promotions existed outside of WWF because, like, the PWI and all those, like, aftermaths, as they called it. But I never really saw, like, it visualized until, like, I started watching cable, watching TBS, Superstation, 605 on a Saturday night, and then saw the Diamond Stud. And this was, I was very young at the time, so I thought anytime where there was a guy jumping over from WCW to WWF or vice versa, I thought it was such a big deal. So he was kind of one of the first guys to me, like, where I was able to see a guy jump from, one place to another. Again, I had read about it previously, but this is one of the first guys that I've seen. And I was like, oh my God, that's a Diamond Stud in the WWF. And now they're giving him what Razor Ramon, like, oh, like, that's not his name. His name is a Diamond Stud, because we're a kid and we don't know better. But yeah, that was one of the first times. And like I said, he kind of, I'm happy they kind of saw a lot in him. And then and I know you're an AWA guy, Adam. I had no idea about Scott Hall and AWA, like zero whatsoever. I barely even knew AWA was a thing. Then saw that he got a lot of his good experience, and not only just experience, because he was a pro in the AWA, but knowing that he had a lot, it was pretty cool, seeing that his first hurrah wasn't in WCW, it was in AWA and that kind of territory era in the 80s.
Absolutely. And Mick Mac is joining us. Hey, Mick Mac, and I look like I'm going to a nightclub. I don't know, but it's a thing. Now,
who
Christy,
goes to a nightclub in just a t-shirt? They wouldn't let you in.
You should see the I guess the lax standard, especially post-COVID, of clubs, especially in West Hollywood. It's wild. It's so wild. People showing up in sweats and Crocs. That is acceptable club attire. But Christy, it's kind of funny because Steve and I were talking off air, but one of the first things that you did in terms of podcasting was helping one Sean Waltman with his podcast, and your guys' first guest was none other than Scott Hall.
Yes, my first time sitting down with Sean Waltman was also with Scott Hall. He called in virtually, and this was years ago. It was before there were so many podcasts, before people were doing virtual interviews. And what the actual situation was is that it wasn't even supposed to be an episode of the show. You know, the way that I got there that day was, Sean's thinking about starting a podcast. Why don't you come down, see how you can help out? And his friend Scott Hall is going to call in. They're going to do like a mock interview. And I thought, why the heck would we waste a Scott Hall interview? You know, when he doesn't, this is especially during a period of time where he hadn't spoken a whole lot recently. And, you know, Sean's one of his best friends. I thought, like, why don't we save that till we get really good? But of course, because of the relationship between Sean and Scott, it was such an awesome conversation. You know, Scott was so open and relaxed, and just, I can't imagine anyone else getting him in that form, you know, to really kind of spill his guts. And it ended up being so great that we decided to make it the first episode of Sean's original podcast. And it went out later that day. The reaction was huge. And, you know, of course, everybody loved to hear from Scott Hall, you know, especially then. This was 2016, I suppose, or something
September
like that.
1st, 2016. I pulled it up real fast.
Thank you.
That's Steve. That is Steve. Mick Mac says, Adam says he knows Eric Bischoff and it gets him anywhere. I might have pulled that on Jason Hervey walking down the street, so I can confirm that. I'm just saying.
Okay, well, I pulled it on Dennis Rodman, so I guess we're all just a bunch of name droppers, guys.
I mean, it works when it works. It works when it works. But in terms of me, yes, I did know of the Diamond Stud, but it was weird. I didn't put the two and two together where Diamond Stud was Scott Hall, even though Diamond Stud was the precursor to what we would see in terms of his charisma and on-air presentation of Razor Ramon. But for me, the vignettes, those first set of vignettes with Razor Ramon and A Chico, and as a third grader in elementary school, I hadn't seen Scarface. So to me, I was like, this dude is cool, man. These, and at the time I had a stutter, right? And it was pretty horrible. Couldn't get a sentence off within the confines of 3 minutes. It was really bad. Wow. But the speech pattern of a Razor Ramon promo is kind of what got me through. And when he eventually made his TV debut, that's what everybody was talking about, and namely the Razor's Edge finisher, where, my goodness, that might have been one of the most devastating finishes at the time, but in all of wrestling history. So with that all being said, like me kind of reciting or mimicking Scott Hall or Razor Ramon promos, I kind of got out of the, my headspace where it enabled me to stutter, got out of it, and it made me the cool kid in school, because once I stopped the stutter, and it dissipated a bit, well, Scott Hall was, this is kind of channeling into the WrestleMania 10 deal. So when I finally got it down pat, Scott Hall would go on to his biggest run and one of his most memorable matches in his run as Razor Ramon.
Wow, that's such a beautiful story, Adam.
Appreciate it. But yeah, so in terms of what George was saying, yes, I am a huge Vern Gagne AWA mark. I actually didn't know that Scott Hall and even Kurt Hennig were a part of the AWA until maybe mid 2000s, when I got this thing called ESPN Classics, and they used to play all the AWA stuff, and I saw a handlebar mustache, almost like froey Scott Hall as like Starship Coyote, and I'm like, what in the hell? Like, and even to think that he was Scott Hall before he became Scott Hall in WCW, that there was a Scott Hall iteration at book ending Razor Ramon, I was just like, it blew my mind. And the fact that he was in AWA, I was just like, oh, completely enthralled.
Yeah, I don't know if people can appreciate that, but if you guys didn't realize that, how really unknown that is. Because we call George the encyclopedia of pro wrestling, and if I wanted to know anything about AWA, Adam would be the first person I would ask. So yeah, so if you guys hadn't even realized that, it's such a cool piece of wrestling history.
Absolutely. And, him teaming with, a young Kurt Hennig pre Mr. Perfect, right? I didn't even know that not only was Kurt Hennig a pre-incarnation of Mr. Perfect as himself and the son of Larry the Axe Hennig, but I didn't even know that, in my estimation, I thought Scott Hall was one of the greatest. I mean, not just Scott Hall, but Kurt Hennig specifically was one of the greatest in-ring performers that never won a world title, not knowing that until later in the mid 2000s that he actually was a former AWA world champion.
Can I just say, a lot's been made out of Scott Hall never having carried a world title in the last few days. I think just because more casual fans are reading that and going, wait, what? What the heck? And my thought about that is like, wow, holy crap. Do we know anyone else in the entire world of pro wrestling who never needed the world title? Who never needed it to get over, who never needed it to tell a story, who, was doing so well establishing their character and telling stories with their friends that he didn't even need to win a big championship. I mean, that blows my mind. That's the first, tool that the pro wrestling world uses to make someone popular, to get your eyes on them. And just the fact that he never needed it blows my mind.
I will say one thing, and then I agree with you 100%. He didn't need it, but he definitely deserved it. So yeah, like I agree with you, but man, it would have been cool to have him, like, because he was that guy where like he had the respect, and obviously demons aside, like he had everybody's respect, and people don't realize just how, like, I still think obviously a lot of praise happens, unfortunately, when somebody passes away or when somebody's like sick, but yeah. I think even in a couple years, I still think that people aren't going to realize just how good he was. Like, he was really, really good.
Absolutely.
And you're talking, in-ring character work, promos, the whole shebang.
Yeah. And just overall understanding of, like, I revert back to him and Kevin Nash as they both came in WCW together and they found their niche. And what I mean by that is they figured out where they fit onto the roster and then where they fit onto the card every night. And in Scott Hall's case, that means getting Goldberg over, let's say. Because Goldberg is going to make more people buy tickets. And if more people buy tickets, some of those people will buy Scott Hall's merch. So that's a larger sample size of people who could buy Scott Hall's merch. And he understood the business that way, that I don't know if he had that strong a push to be a world champion. I have no idea.
He certainly could have been selfish, right? And we hear many, many stories about one of the things that Sean Waltman came out and reminded everybody of is when he was out with a broken neck and, Razor Ramon was wearing his t-shirt every week and making everyone else wear his t-shirt and making all the other boys say his name in promos. You know what I mean? So he wasn't someone who wanted all the attention for themselves. I think sometimes, we hear about the clique and history really has written itself with a lot of that, of course. But I just think how selfless he was and how much he gave to other performers is another thing that people don't always realize about him.
I remember there was a lot of episodes of Nitro in the late 90s or late 97, early 98, him going up again. And again, this was like NWO was Teflon, right? They were untouchable. Hogan had like 5 matches a year. Kevin Nash went up against Big Show, like Savage went up against EDP, and obviously they're in that main event level. And so was Scott Hall. But Scott Hall was like going up against 98 Chris Jericho, going up against Hector Garza, like going up against all these guys that like he didn't need to face some of these guys, but he knew that like by being in the ring with Scott Hall, like this is going to get these guys over. And he even jobbed to some of these guys. He even let the other guys win. And he could have easily said like, no, I mean, I don't want to put these jabronis over, but he did. And you go back to 93, I think it was May 18th, 93, I think. We all remember that time where he beat an unknown 1-2-3 kid. Like, he didn't have to do that, but obviously he knew Sean Waltman's background. He knew that he was a guy on the come up and everything. And like, he totally made, and this is probably something that Waltman has said over and over again, he totally made the 1-2-3 kid. Like, he didn't have to, and he did. And he had that mindset. And look at the Crow. Like, he is single-handedly responsible for the resurgence of Sting, after the Surfer gimmick. And I'm glad that things like 83 Weeks exist, and not just because we do with Bischoff, but even before then, like because that has given a platform to show just how brilliant of a mind Scott Hall was.
Couldn't agree with you any more. And again, this is why it was so pivotal to have you guys on. And Throwback over on Twitch saying, "What's good, guys? Keep killing it." Thank you, Throwback, good brother. You can be found on the bodyslam.net universe where we're being simulcasted. And what would be a show with us and McMac without McMac's sense of humor? Why was the cheese depressed? Because it was blue. And I love how he put the U rather than BLUE. There you go. Thank you, McMac.
Another good one.
Speaking of, just to add on real quick, because I won't be on for long. And a lot of the things that I was saying about putting guys over, I didn't even know this existed. But obviously, in the past couple of days, like there was there's been a match going around, on Twitter, the Twitterverse and whatnot, of like Scott Hall putting over this young boy from New Japan, just random, Scott Hall against some young guy from 2001, and he put the guy over. Who was that guy? Hiroshi Tanahashi from a multi-time IWGP World Champion. Like Scott Hall saw something in him in 2001. And again, this was before the glory, and again, that just kind of shows how great and how brilliant and how smart he was as far as being able to put some of these young guys over and to help them achieve to another level.
Similarly, he appeared in ECW. I had the match up, and then I went to check the Tanahashi thing. But he appeared in ECW and lost to Sally Graziano. And like, I can't think of a better way to okay, well, if I'm going to be in this company, how do I make this company stronger? It's like, who's your biggest, baddest dude who needs to lose to me, or who should beat me, who needs a win over me to make their whole career? And that's such selflessness. Like, could anyone in this room imagine getting hired by a different company that does the same stuff you do, and their first thought is, how do I get everybody else over though? How do I make the IT guy look great?
No, and that says to me is that was his love for the business, right? He wanted everyone to succeed. He wanted the fans to love everything that was going on. He wanted there to be new, exciting characters for people to love. Like all these things we're talking about, all these great attributes, to me, that tells me that he loved being a part of this business and the people that he worked with.
I saw a tweet. I can't remember the wrestler, but I think he was just just some indie guy, like nothing mainstream or anything like that. But I guess he picked up Scott Hall. Or he saw him at a wrestling show, and he was like, "Hey Scott, let me take you around the back entrance. That way, you can stay away from the fans. That way you don't have to worry about getting bombarded by the fans." And Scott Hall replied like, "What? Like you don't have to do that. Like I'm never gonna say no to a pop." And then they proceeded to go around, in front of all the fans and whatnot. So I was like, wow, like that, just to pretty much add on to everything that you just said, Christy.
Yeah, and what's kind of crazy is we're a lot of us know a fellow podcaster of Rock and Roll Beer Guy podcast, Eddie Torres, who is of Cuban descent, and the persona of Razor Ramon. A lot of even Cubans embrace him, but there's not too much known about Scott Hall's origins pre-Florida. I think even in the WWE kind of documentary that they had on him, they covered when he was bouncing at a strip club that unfortunately resulted in a guy losing his life, which you could make an argument, and I think even Scott Hall alluded to it himself, where maybe that was like the beginning of some of the demons starting to appear itself, right? But with what actually Steve actually shared with our little group chat is the Scott Hall shoot that can be found on what is the channel, Steve?
It's youtube.com/KC Vault.
Yes.
I happen to know that real quick.
I'm just saying. Yes. But I mean, we kind of got a snippet, and I think this is like the earliest pre-Florida, AWA kind of tidbit in kind of pulling back the curtain of Scott Hall's young life, where he was actually a military brat which I didn't know before. But his dad also struggled horribly with alcoholism, which affected him and his siblings.
Wow, him coming from a military family makes a lot of sense, especially back in the day. And this is something I'm sure we'll talk about as well. The guys were on the road for 300 plus days a year. And I can only imagine, that's hard for everybody. Not everybody can do that. And maybe part of the reason why he was able to survive that life is because of his childhood growing up, probably moving around a ton.
Yeah, 1,000%, 1,000%. The one, the only solo, just waving. Let's wave, right? And I guess what the day is here.
Is there a too sweet emoji somewhere in there?
Too sweet. Yeah, we need one of those. Absolutely.
Where's that at?
Yeah, but who's the better character, Razor Ramon or Scott Hall? And I think at a point, especially in WCW, as they were kind of skirting around the intellectual property and Vince McMahon having a fake Razor Ramon and fake Diesel. Fake Diesel ended up becoming Kane. But, it was a weird one because, yes, he could be called Scott Hall, but he was very much Razor Ramon. So I don't know where Scott Hall and Razor stopped and ended, but it wasn't a showy kind of way that we kind of know Hulk Hogan, in depositions going, I don't know what my gimmick is. Are you talking about Hulk Hogan's anatomy or are you talking about Terry Bollea's anatomy? Scott Hall didn't take it that far, but he was able to kind of seamlessly kind of merge, the Razor Ramon persona that he became kind of, and we kind of saw it again in WCW as Diamond Stud, but he kind of merged that pretty effortlessly where at some points they were kind of symbiotic towards each other, at least to us, the wrestling fan.
And to lawyers who deposed, among other people, Mark Madden. Anytime I mention this, anytime you mention Jerry McDevitt, Mark Madden will go out of his way to be like, last time I heard of, or spoke to Jerry McDevitt, I got deposed for 6 hours. Because I believe it was either the hotline or just on the air, he had some information that Jerry McDevitt was trying to prove that it was, this was inside information, instead of like, no, this was just, Dave Meltzer knew this. Dave Meltzer knew this, so I said it. Like, it was outside information. And I do think the melding happened, heading into WCW, the melding happened so well that lawsuit on his end actually had quite a bit of merit. I don't know how you can tell me Kevin Nash was Diesel, but like how the cadence of speech where Scott Hall came into WCW, like the argument could be made that, oh man, that's very similar to Razor Ramon, but over time he melded himself into like, no, I'm Scott Hall and this is what Scott Hall does. I would also argue on principle he's the better character. Like he is longer standing television wise. Scott Hall, the guy in WCW, had way more many places to go as a wrestler and a character, whereas Razor Ramon felt a lot cartoony and a little, I wouldn't say one note, but definitely not 5 notes. Like he'd be a 2-note character.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say for me personally, I would say year 2 of NWO, or maybe 6 inclusion of member. I think when Vincent got included in the NWO, I was like, I actually forgot about Razor Ramon and that, like, the presentation that Scott Hall was basically permeating on the WCW airwaves. That was just like, oh, that's just him. Like, to me, Razor Ramon was just him, the guy that is the character, right? And the character that is the guy, much like maybe John Heater and Napoleon Dynamite, right? Like they're kind of symbiotic, right? So to me, I was just like, no, that's a shoot. He's really that guy. He's really that smooth. He's, and go back. I think that is one of the most shared, post Scott Hall's passing clips that have been shared all across social media and it was done before it, but even more so now, getting another run. But a fan throwing some sort of beverage in the middle of a promo, and Scott Hall just whatever. And to me, that just like he was that guy. Whether he was oozing machismo, whether he be called Razor Ramon or Scott or whatever, he was just that guy.
Mm-hmm. It was authentic.
Yeah, 100%. Now, I mean, obviously, many demons, right? I think that's That is equal part of Scott Hall's story, and I don't want to divulge too much of it, but when you think about it, right, when George, you referenced a wrestler kind of talking about him basically trying to provide another entrance to a show and what have you, and he wanting another pop. And maybe even the Tanahashi run in New Japan, right? He might have been in the depths of his despair and still had the wherewithal of knowing what was best for the business. And like Bret Hart and a lot of the guys from like the Hart Foundation side of the locker room, they didn't have too many good stories about maybe a Shawn or maybe a Triple H or Hunter Hearst Helmsley at the time, and maybe even Aldo Montoya and later Justin Credible. But Scott Hall, is one that Brett respected in terms of worker, character wise. In terms of the ring, aside from his demons, I think it was universally accepted that this is a guy that has everything, whether it be the persona in front of the camera when the red light goes on, he doesn't clam up.
Mhm.
He's absolutely what you need him to be for what it is. And in the ring, he is very yeah, more than serviceable. Yeah, where he remains one of the greatest what ifs of what if he got a world title run, especially during the time where Nash was the booker and had a
Well,
couple
there
title runs himself.
I would argue there are multiple what ifs in his career. Because what if Razor Ramon, in order to keep him, in order to keep Razor Ramon, let's say they decide we're going to let Diesel Kevin Nash, we're going to let him go, but we're going to do everything we can to keep Razor Ramon. What if he got to beat Bret Hart and become world champion? What would the landscape of wrestling look like if only Kevin Nash went to WCW and Scott Hall stayed, and then they tried to made him a main eventer? And then he's feuding with Bret Hart. He's feuding with Steve Austin. He's feuding with a young Triple H. Like, we want to talk about massive what ifs. I don't know if I feel it would be more of the same. And I think the business is better that he went to WCW.
No, absolutely. And I guess in the mindset of Scott Hall, where he's leaving one promotion and might appear on another, channel, George Ramosa, he's actually going to not appear on this podcast, but maybe his own YouTube channel. And George, what is that YouTube channel?
Well, first off, I want to say thank you for having me on. It's always a delight to be on with the According to Woods YouTube channel. Hopefully, I can be back again. I think the world needs another 6-hour podcast with me and you. But yes, I just, like I said, just to kind of wrap up what I'm saying, because I know you guys are still going to be on. Like, yes, Razor, Scott Hall, all the above. Like, there was. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's one or two, but from my opinion, in my head, there's never the cool heel never existed before Scott Hall. It was always a hatred heel. I mean, yeah, maybe there was heels that we liked, but there was no such thing as a cool heel before Scott Hall and NWO. But yes, he definitely. I think I'm bittersweet because I'm happy that people are finally get to realize just how revolutionary the guy was, how great in the ring he was, how how brilliant his mind was, like I said before. So again, Scott Hall, I'm happy that you're getting your glory again in a bittersweet way. But yes, the youtube.com/the wrestling chatter, next or May 30th, or I'm sorry, March 30th, the long awaited interview with Rob Black from EC or XPW. I'm happy to be sharing it with you guys on March 30th. So tune in and hopefully you guys like it. Christy, Steve, Adam, you guys are 3 of my favorite people of all time, and I will see you guys soon, hopefully in person.
Yeah, absolutely. Woo. Thank you, George. We couldn't have done this without your superior intellect of all things. So thank you. Thank you. And as we soldier on, George definitely touched on it, right? Where I think one of the biggest obviously WWE moments, but WrestleMania 10 ladder match with Shawn Michaels moments was on Raw, where he has a crazy match with the burgeoning Lightning Kid, who we now know as Sean Waltman, and because of Sean's like out from behind moonsault victory over Razor Ramon, he becomes the 1-2-3 kid, and that was the name that he kind of carried until he became X-Pac, and now obviously he's branded that pretty well with podcasts and what have you. But a large part of Sean Waltman's early kind of prominence, and obviously Sean was right from the jump with his martial arts background and what have you. He was pretty amazing. And pre WWF, him going on a national and worldwide scene with the WWF, he had a great feud in, I think it was Global Championship Wrestling or Global Wrestling Federation with a young Jerry Lynn, who would go on his own route and go and have a amazing series of matches with Rob Van Dam. But it was really Scott Hall kind of tipping the hat to Sean Waltman that really legitimized him in my eyes. I was just like, oh, this dude is cool, but he could also be a jobber. I thought my first impressions of Lightning Kid, well, yeah, he has cool moves, but he could be the WWF's version of Joey Maggs, the jobber in WCW. So if not for Scott, man, like, what would Sean Waltman's career look like?
Well, and I can tell you that that's something that Sean pondered on quite a bit, and always gave Scott that credit, really, really did, give him all the credit for that. And again, Sean is just one of those people. To me, we're talking about career accolades, what he did and didn't get, in the ring. To me, how many people's careers did you help make? That's one of the biggest indicators of how successful your career was, and again, it's like this guy could have been, a Hall of Fame wrestling scout and never stepped foot in the ring. From what we're saying here.
Yeah. No, 100%, 100%. Mick Mack saying you four, with George being here, should make a sitcom together like Seinfeld. George could be Kramer.
Am I Costanza or Seinfeld in this comparison?
I'm voting you as Jerry.
Really?
Yeah, I think so.
I think I'm. Let me know in the chat. I think I'm more Costanza.
Okay. All right. I mean, in the.
And I'm sorry for gendering. Christy is Elaine, but like.
I mean, I was gonna say if gendered gets me more Emmys than Lucille Ball, I'm good to go.
Yeah. I hope that I'm whatever Jerry Stiller's character was. That's
my dad, Costanza's dad.
Costanza's dad.
Okay.
Yeah,
right.
I like it. I like it. In terms of the one and only Solo, how do you think the fans would have responded? And I believe he's referencing, if one Scott Hall was a world champion recognized by either WWF or WCW. How do you guys think?
That's such a good question. Sorry, Steve, but
please.
I'll be quick because, I think even as we keep talking, what a travesty it was he didn't get one and what could have been in kind of fantasy booking. It's like, I don't know that even would have been a blip on his resume. You know what I mean? Look at everything else that he accomplished. Would have being a world champion even been that big of a deal? It would have had to have been an epic feud. It would have had to be with someone as big as he to kind of overcome everything else he did for us even to remember or I think even get excited about it. It would have had to have been early on in his career because any later, from late 90s on, it would have been like, well, of course, Scott Hall. Of course he's a world champion. Like, all right.
Yeah.
I go back to my what if about Razor Ramon becoming WWF champion only because of how the WWF and the WWE product are compared to WCW sometimes. And what I mean is, remember when Jinder Mahal was world champion?
Yeah.
And it felt like a fluke and it was weird and it was silly. And then you tune into SmackDown 2 weeks later and he has the Chiron and he has the 2-minute intro and the lights dim and he comes out and he's holding the belt and you're like, he looks like a world champion now because he is a world champion. I think that's what we would have seen with Scott Hall. So to answer the question, how the fans would have reacted, I think WWF would have known to present him in a way that it's like, no, he's your world champion. There's no two ways about it. He's gonna have a promo up top, a promo in the middle, match at the end, because that's what the world champion does, and we've trained you to know that that's how we present our world champion, and therefore that's who our world champion is. In the age of Sid, Undertaker, Bret Hart, and then Shawn Michaels. I'm thinking all just 97. What would the story have been to get him into that mix is what I'm curious of in this what if section.
King of the Ring.
Okay.
King of the Ring, and I would have actually in this particular scenario, because I think that was the first year that Brett won, and Brett has 3 different matches. I think Scott Hall, Bam Bam Bigelow, and somebody else, right?
June of 97 is when June of 97, it was Triple H.
Oh.
Yes, June 8th, 1997 in Providence, Rhode Island, which would mean likely 96. 96 was Steve Austin.
Okay.
So, talking years.
Yeah.
But actually, no, I have it wrong. 96 was when he made the jump, so 97 wouldn't have mattered.
Right.
Because it would have been Triple H in 96 had the curtain call not happened. Allegedly.
Yeah.
Are we still saying allegedly now?
Oh.
That feels...
No, I think
It feels pretty obvious.
Yeah, at this point.
Pretty sure I've been in a room when some people have admitted that was really the case. Pretty sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And the one and only Solo says, I think, yes, you are.
Thank you.
The Costanza. Nick Mac agreeing 100%.
Love it.
What's the deal?
Dude, you working for the Yankees, trying to cap a nap, in your desk. That's what I want. I want you with the World Series pendant, trying to get fired. Driving it around. That's the George Costanza that I want you.
If it's us, it would be the
elevate.
Dodgers, but same difference.
Yeah, this is true. Yeah,
We're all SoCal people.
yeah, adjusted
get a
for
script
coastline. Yeah, adjusted for coastline for sure. And the one and only Solo says they could have made it a miracle event where there was a what the fuck moment, maybe not flukish, but it could have worked. Which when Sid became world champion, was that post Hall and Nash leaving to WCW?
Y'all
Sorry.
letting George Hermosa go and
we
then
lost
putting us on
our
the spot.
encyclopedia.
Absolutely. No, but to me, I would like, maybe hindsight 2020, but I would have rather Scott Hall been there, not Sid. I don't know. Like Scott Hall, I thought was a way better worker than Sid. I mean, by a country mile.
Well, Scott's got 2 Hall of Fame inductions, and those Sid rumors are still just rumors for this year, right?
Yeah.
Still just rumors.
So
But also, Fleetwood Mac's rumors is like one of the most recognized albums in all of rock history. So there's that. So there is a way that you could concisely legitimize rumors. I mean, Dave Lancer has literally made a career of it.
don't have to tell me twice.
Yeah.
Also, Sid's first title reign is November 96 at the Survivor Series, and Hall and Nash already were there by May of 96 in WCW.
Okay.
Just
Okay.
quick fact
All right.
check.
Okay, that works. But I mean, had they have stayed, that's kind of my scenario. Scott Hall winning the title is had they would have stayed. You plug in Scott Hall for Sid, right? And Sid never becomes champion in the WWF, but Scott Hall does. But that would be a big what if, because I don't think the necessity to have Sid as champion would be there if Hall and Nash would have still stayed. So it's a weird one.
Well, it's also a weird one because, and I would contend to this, and I'm happy to read about it in the comments, that the wrestling business doesn't actually grow. The WWF maintains prominence, but it maintains prominence over a million and a half people every week. WCW never grows because they never get the shot in the arm they need. And I mean, Sid doesn't become champion, but Scott Hall does. And then, like, from a labor standpoint, Scott Hall gets what he wants because he becomes champion and gets champion's money. But then he never goes and sets an example for the rest of both locker rooms that you have actual leverage. And I think it's that leverage coupled with that energy, the energy of that leverage, coupled with just the boom of actual talent that led to the wrestling business growing to the point where my grandmom knows most of these names. And I worry that my grandma would have never known who Razor Ramon was if Scott Hall hadn't left WCW. We're having a
we call
fun
her
one
an
with you.
asshole?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. Raul Perez says R.I.P. Razor. That's coming from Raul in Long Island, New York. Thank you, Raul. That's amazing, and I think that's the overwhelming sentiment of what we're doing here. For me, the necessity to kind of do this is like I saw the WWE promo package that they do, with everyone, and I liked everyone else's. I didn't think it hit all the points with Scott Hall. And I was just like, there's a better way to memorialize him. And like I said, for me, I thought since we're not doing after 83 weeks, right? And so somebody that we work with and was inducted in, well, Eric Bischoff got a solo induction, which I really feel like he should get included.
Because those guys insisted on it. Scott and Kevin and Sean insisted on that.
Well, the plan was had COVID not shut down the first Tampa WrestleMania, I believe the plan was for the end of Hall, Nash, and Waltman to get inducted into the Hall of Fame, and at some point in the speech, they invite Eric up to the stage to get his ring. But that Hall of Fame ceremony never happened, and then they doubled up on Hall of Fame ceremonies to a point where they just gave Eric Bischoff his own solo induction the year later, because remember, it was only this time last year where we were having the 2020 and 2021 Hall of Fame induction ceremonies back to back, not live from the Thunderdome.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's right.
We're gonna pull that up for nostalgia, guys.
Oh, please don't. You know what? When we talk about that, it just makes me so grateful that we're not there this year, and that Hall of Famers this year will be able to get kind of the full experience, right? Because even when we talked to Eric about that, he said, of course, nothing can match going in the Hall of Fame, but there was a lot of aspects to it that usually go down that he didn't get to experience. You know what I mean? And of course, got 2 chances at that. But they weren't going to go in without Eric. And hey, Adam, I wanted to ask you if you thought the WWE tribute package was lacking. Did you think that they were trying to not highlight the WCW history as much? Fans always like to say, "Oh, Vince didn't create it, so he doesn't want to remind us of it." Did you feel that that's why it didn't seem to really represent his full career?
You know what? I actually think it was maybe a matter of my taste, but I think when the news broke out, I saw on Instagram, it was Scott Hall on Jerry Springer. And this is pre-Jerry Springer becoming the sensationalist that we kind of now know his legacy to be on his show. And I think he's still doing it in some form or fashion, right? But I actually saw Scott Hall come on with 2 kids that were, had essentially horrible things befall of them, almost like a Make-A-Wish type scenario, right? And Scott Hall comes from the, from the top of the stage in through the crowd, and greets these 2. And I think this might have been post WrestleMania 10, which still for my money is my favorite WrestleMania personally. Start to finish, it was just great. Even the 10-man tag and the crazy Randy Savage crush match or whatever. Still, to me, that is still one of my most watched WrestleManias. I go to sleep in some nights when I have anxiety with WrestleMania 10 on, and that just pisses my wife off to no end, but that's another story for another day. But yeah, I mean, Scott Hall comes and greets these 2, and Jerry's asking him questions, and "You're a warrior," something to that effect. Of course, I'm paraphrasing it, but Scott Hall has this amazing in-character response, and especially nowadays, where wrestlers are given, they don't know the character, they may or may not know the character that they are portraying on TV, they don't have a familiarity, but in character of Razor Ramon, he's saying that what I do is tough, what my colleagues do are tough, but the fight that these 2 are fighting is stronger and more disastrous than anything that I could have. And then he basically gives IC title, and not a replica. This is
Mhm.
pre-replica. This was an actual ring use TV shown Intercontinental title, and he goes like, "Hey, share it with Heidi Broadbent, who in 25 years has become one of the biggest advocates for HIV awareness because she was one of the first generation of kids that were born with HIV." And in
Wow.
Scott Hall's U shoot, he actually said, because Sean Oliver does bring it up, that he was still in contact with Heidi Broadbent, which again,
My
it wasn't just
gosh.
it wasn't just him as an in-ring performer. The people who he made an impact on, he made an impact on, and I mean, memories that last a lifetime, and that is, to me, what anybody should want in becoming, whether any type of entertainer, to really capture the hearts, the souls, the minds of people, to kind of get them away from bad day at work or whatever the case may be, bad relationship, whatever the case may be. And I think it was fully encapsulated better in that Jerry Springer clip. And this is no fault
Yeah.
to WWE's production department, who are, I mean, literally top tier, right? But I just think I saw that, and that tugged at my heartstrings a little bit more than.
Well, because it's real. What he also revealed in that U shoot is he personally had to call Vince McMahon and say, "Hey, I need a new belt for TV." And he's like, "What happened? Did you lose it?" And he's like, "Well, no, I had to give it to a sick kid." And he's like, I had to give it to a sick kid." And he was like, "Oh, never mind. That's the babyface thing to do." And it was a really really cute story. And I think the reason that clip resonates with all of us, because it was real. It wasn't planned for him to give away the belt. He just decided, no, you deserve this.
And those are his attributes that we should be talking about. That kind-heartedness, that non-judgmental, that, looking at those kids and seeing them as being heroes instead of himself as one. Those are things that that aren't going to be on someone's resume, that aren't going to be in the tribute, like you said, Adam. And certainly things that we didn't hear a lot about that side of Scott, right? We all know that John Cena has fulfilled the most Make-A-Wishes ever. You know what I mean? But we don't hear these kinds of things about Scott. And you're right. I would have loved to see that clip, on Raw or SmackDown.
Yeah, absolutely. And the one and only Solo says, before SmackDown, WCW was lit. I agree with you 100%. And I remember when Heidi Broadbent, and she was on Geraldo Rivera's talk show. God, I'm old. I'm there too, bud.
Oh.
I'm there too. Don't
And
worry.
Jenny Jones, you guys, Ricky
Yeah.
Lake,
Ricky
Sally
Lake.
Jesse Raphael.
Yeah,
Oh,
that was
the
a
90s were
whole
the
thing.
golden age of talk
I'm
shows.
24 years old. I don't know what any of these things are.
Oh, right on, Steve. Thank you for aging us.
Good one, Steve.
But also, in terms of the in-ring stuff, right, and moments, right? Obviously, him walking onto Nitro, the famous like, who I am, you don't know why I'm here, and that was, looking back, right, with the intellectual property stuff and the lawsuits that were to come, that is the most like, he has the voice, he has, that like, he was the perfect guy. I don't even think Nash would have been able to do that. And he brings in Nash, and for a large audience, we knew Hall and Nash, or Razor and Diesel, as adversaries, and I don't think the curtain call at Madison Square Garden was widely known. I know it was kind of circulated amongst tape traders and obviously the dirt sheets and what have you, but we didn't have that moment. But also another pivotal moment in WCW that set the birth of another, arguably Hall of Fame level competitor, was Scott Hall and Kevin Nash versus the Steiner brothers, who at the time there was this kind of, is Scott gonna join the NWO and what have you. They were managed by Ted DiBiase at the time, and I believe it was Super Brawl. I can't remember which Super Brawl, but it was the one in San Francisco at the Cow Palace, and that was also the payoff of Sting, repelling from the rafters. But that is also probably one of my most rewatched pay-per-views of all time.
Super Bowl 7. Go on.
7. There you go. I appreciate. Yeah.
Sean talked about the Call Palace all the time, so that
Yeah.
must have been a big one on those guys' radar as
Oh
well.
no,
'cause
100%.
he about the Cow Palace all the time.
Yeah, and especially with that, that building is so much wrestling history going back to the territory days of the San Francisco territory with obviously the Rock's grandfather, High Chief Peter Maivia, I believe Rocky Johnson as well, Rock's dad, Pat Patterson, Ray Stevens, a litany of luminaries coming out of that Hall of Fame level competitors that drew money everywhere that they went after the San Francisco territory shut down. But it was just so masterful, right? Because you had Rick, right, and the rumors are that hopefully the Steiner brothers will be inducted in this year's class. Well, yes, the Steiner brothers are one of the greatest tag teams of all time, right? But I think you basically solidify a Hall of Fame induction with Big Papa Pump, right, being a centerpiece for WCW, and it is literally culminated with Hall, Nash, and the Steiner brothers. And I remember even Scott Hall basically putting Rick Steiner in the Outsider's Edge after he had his heart broken. Him and Ted DiBiase had their heart broken. Ted DiBiase, his World Tag Team Champions and charges, right? And this is still of the auspice of the great Gorilla Monsoon. Hey, if you lose a match, you don't go to the pay window. That is what I still believed at that time.
Love that.
Right. So, that of course the $1 Million Man is upset because he's losing a payday, right? Rick is obviously just absolutely heartbroken that his brother has gone to the dark side, right? And then again, of course, Scott does his deal, and we would see the evolution of what would become Big Papa Pump in that incarnation. But I vividly remember as Rick is kind of, absolutely beside himself that his brother had joined, Scott Hall placing Rick in the Outsider's Edge and dropping him just a little bit of insult to injury, literally.
I do want to see a podcast called The Pay Window, and it's just Adam Woods at the end of a big card. It doesn't have to be wrestling, and you're only interviewing the winners.
Or we're just talking crap about who deserves to get paid and who doesn't.
Ooh,
wins
okay.
and losses
That's
aside.
not the loose pitch here. I like the idea of the pay window with blank. We'll figure the rest out.
We'll figure the rest out. We won't have the Seinfeld. I mean, that might be still up in the air, but I definitely think that the pay window that might be a thing, assuming it's not already trademarked. I'm gonna do a quick Google search after this. But yeah, so I guess in closing, and I want each of you guys to go, but what do you think the overall impact of Scott Hall, whether it be Scarstrip, Coyote, Razor Ramon, Diamond Stud, Scott Hall, what is his lasting effort and impact on the wrestling industry?
I think his lasting impact on the wrestling industry is selflessness. Selflessness that allowed for someone like Sean Waltman to get over as early as he did in his career. It was selflessness to allow himself to stand. Like the one time he stood up for himself, it actually became selfless. That he, in his action by going to WCW, and I'm a broken record, made the wrestling business bigger. And I think he, looking back on it, and will look back on it forever and be, wow, the wrestling business, there's no telling how small the wrestling business could have stayed if he didn't do what he did. And I think that level of selflessness to make the business bigger than him at an age when some people became bigger than the business can't be understated.
No, absolutely. Christy, especially you're seeing the outpouring of, personal sentiments, memories, and what have you. I mean, this is almost, we've had big wrestling deaths, unfortunately, but I mean, this one at the height of social media age, and Scott Hall wasn't a big social media or tech guy.
Right.
I mean, it's incredible, right?
Yeah, it is, even despite the fact that he wasn't huge on social media. And to be honest with you, I personally can be a little cynical about when we lose someone, the outpouring of social media and then the photos, everyone who has ever taken a picture with him are posting and stuff like that. And to be honest with you, I find that a lot of times sort of disingenuous. This time around, There was nothing but absolutely authentic, genuine. You could tell that people are really going to miss Scott on a day to day, that his friends, his best friends, are going to miss him every single day. And on top of that, what came out, Brett, right? Was it Brett
Yeah.
or Sean? Yeah, Brett made the point that, if these guys maybe wouldn't have been on the road for 300 days a year, their lives would be very different. Their health, especially, would be very different. And I think that it's important, that Scott represents one of those guys who was able to do that, make that happen. Because I think the guys nowadays, our current superstars sort of forget that they're in that same boat. It's only been a couple of years since they were all on the road 300 days a year as well. And we can all look at Scott Hall and go, he survived. He did it even with his demons, but that they don't have to anymore. I think because guys like Scott paved the way and got guaranteed downsides and that sort of thing. And, going off what you said, Steve, one thing, probably the only thing that I think is bigger than pro wrestling is the NWO. It's the only thing in wrestling that's bigger than wrestling. The only t-shirts you see that people who aren't wrestling fans wear, everybody sees that, celebrities wear it, people know what it is, even if they know absolutely nothing about pro wrestling. And of course, the guy who created NWO, Eric Bischoff, always says it was all about casting. It was about every single one of those guys being the right choice. But Scott Hall started it all. He was the guy, like you said, it would have had a different impact if it would have been Kevin Nash who came over first. Scott Hall is the beginnings of the NWO. And I think that, as sort of base as that sounds, like, oh, Scott Hall, NWO, that's going to be his biggest career thing. I think it really is that simple because he was the one who kicked it all off.
No, 100%. And, for me, I guess in closing, it's wild because obviously what he meant to the wrestling fraternity, the brotherhood and the sisterhood that, and I think that gets marred when he joins the clique and all of that. But this is somebody that was universally respected, not just by his peers, but and obviously the fans. We all have a great, whether it be Razor Ramon or Scott Hall story, and and like you were saying, Christy, a lot of people post the pictures and do the tributary posts after somebody passes away. But people were sharing Scott Hall memes and gifts and all that stuff even before he passed away. So hopefully he was able to see some of it. Also to see his son Cody, have a run in Japan, as somebody whose parents might have wanted me to do this, right? And my first interview, my first jiu-jitsu, anything happened after my parents had passed away. The fact that he was able to see his son follow in his footsteps and maybe have, especially all of the demons that Scott Hall battled and everything like that behind him as a cautionary tale. I think the only other person, other than Cody Hall would probably be Harry Smith, Davey Boy Smith Jr., in terms of their fathers having pretty historic demons, right? And following suit into it and maybe not having some of the same downfalls as through that. And all of these memories that we have, have Scott Hall as a performer, especially as he becomes prominent in the wrestling world, was at the point where his demons were pretty well documented and apparent to people that were in the know, and who he's since basically gone on record to kind of confirm. So it's amazing that all of the stuff that he was battling in his personal life, his demons, the murder, him coming, and this is another thing that doesn't get brought up, is he got into wrestling at 29. He was already a man. Right? He was a guy. He was an adult.
And retiree age for an athlete.
Yeah.
Not a wrestler, not necessarily a wrestler, because I would argue wrestlers are their best around 32. 32 having been doing it their whole 20s. But to start wrestling at 29,
no one was encouraging that. Like when he went to training, no one said to him like, "Oh yeah, this is a good idea, bro."
Oh no. They were trying to make him do the 1,000 Hindi squats because they already had his money and they're trying to run him off. I think that's just day one wrestling school.
Well, yeah, like when you talk about Cody, talk about his son, I have to assume that Scott was detrimental in coaching Cody along in what went on behind the scenes. Because we know now, especially that everybody's got their podcasts and are talking really honestly and openly about the business, that nepotism is something that creates a lot of feelings and a lot of energy backstage. And I think, Cody could only be as successful as he even has been with, the help of his dad and with his dad sharing his experience. So I can only imagine, how close they were and how much Cody looked to his dad for guidance.
I do want to pose one final question.
Sure.
Do we think it would be too reactionary to posthumously put Scott Hall in the WWE Hall of Fame this year and make him the first time, 3-time WWE Hall of Famer? Do we think that'd be too reactionary, or do we think that would be too soon? Do we think that would be something they would ever do?
Okay, that would be way too reactionary, moral wise. However, WWE, if they think of that, will absolutely do that. The one thing they are great at is capitalizing on what gets general public attention, especially around WrestleMania time. They're trying to bring back those casual fans, and a lot of casual fans are older and they remember Scott Hall, they remember the NWO, they remember all of that. So I think that now that you've posed it, Steve, I would call that likely. Maybe slightly inappropriate, and capitalizing on it, but that doesn't mean it's not going to happen.
And there are worse things. Like if his son Cody gets to appear on the stage at WrestleMania weekend. Who, by the way, he just tweeted that he's available for bookings. That
Wow.
that for whatever, like, there are worse things. But you're right. I think it would be like, as a Hall of Fame, you're supposed to have a certain unbiased opinion, but at the same time, Pete Rose is in your Hall of Fame. There's no physical hall. You created the whole thing just because you thought Andre the Giant was so great. Like that's the baseline for the WWE Hall of Fame or the WWF Hall of Fame, is we think Andre the Giant is so great that we would like to honor him while he's still with us. So we're going to create a Hall of Fame for Andre the Giant.
Actually, wasn't it the year after Andre passed away? I think he was inducted.
Did I get the years wrong? But like, it was for him.
But it was definitely for him. No, 100%.
Well, so there, if that, especially if the whole Hall of Fame started as sort of a reaction to and a way of making a tribute to someone who had passed, that almost makes it slightly more appropriate.
Yeah,
I think we might be onto something here.
You guessed it, Kaufman.
Yeah, exactly. There you go.
Class of '93 was just Andre the Giant.
Mm-hmm.
One-time WWF World Heavyweight Champion for like a minute, kind of.
Yeah.
Twin referees.
Yeah, and a payoff of Ted DiBiase. It's good. It's Andre went to the pay window that night for sure. And the one and only Solo says definitely his work at the NWO. All right, and the Halls might have that Tom Brady gene in their just champions, thoroughbred, man.
And not and easy on the eyes.
That too. I think who was it? There was somebody on the U shoot that was like putting him over, in terms of his physical acumen, but also there was a weird point where it divulged into like which ring rats were the best in which town. Which Steve,
I can only imagine they had to keep lists before cell phone contact books.
Yeah.
All I'll tell you is the answer will shock you. YouTube.com/KCVault.
Absolutely. Yes. And to me, it's a little bit of my childhood gone, right? With Scott Hall. That was a linchpin. Like, obviously the Brett one, the Owen one I did. When Brett eventually goes, that's going to hit me hard. Eddie Guerrero. There are people that just, in the wrestling business, that almost transcend the business, but they very much elect something in you, right? And that's when wrestling is at its best, where it gets the viewer in the emotional core and makes them believe in whatever. And to me, Scott Hall was one of the best diplomats of making us believe what we saw out of him, and even at times when he was at his worst. So even when you're at your worst, when you feel you're at your worst, you could be capable. You are capable of some of the best work that can transcends generations. And I think that is the long lasting effect of one Scott Hall.
Another beautiful sentiment from Adam Woods.
Well, just a guy. But so obviously you guys are tuned in here. According to Woods is where you can find me. But obviously, I guess we'll go with Christy first. Ladies first. Where can they find you, Christy Olson, on social media?
Well, we talked a lot about After 83 Weeks with Eric Bischoff here tonight. That's where the four of us sit down with Eric every single week and give you guys the opportunity to ask him any question. It's live. We have so much fun. Please join us. It's on the 83 Weeks channel on Thursdays at 5 p.m. Pacific time. And you guys can always hit me up at Christy Reports. I've got some things in the works. If you notice here, I've got a new setup that I'm still working on. I just moved, so I am in kind of launch mode right now. So keep your eyes on me. It's coming. It's coming.
There you go. Definitely eyes. Just eyes.
Yeah, right
Bang.
here.
Right there. And Steve Coffin, literally, you do almost nothing in the podcast world? No, not at all.
Nothing at all.
Useless, this guy.
I am unemployed. If anyone would like to hire me, I'm at Steve Kaufman. That's Kaufmann. You can actually go to stevekaufman.com to see a listing of all we're still at 14, but there are 15 YouTube pages that I currently run. It's about to be 20 real fast. Quarterly, they drop I get another like 6 to 8 clients. That's kind of how it's going. I'm really, really happy for it, and I tweet about it when I can. And Twitter is almost exclusive where you can find me.
Excellent. And according to Woods, and we thank the good people at bodyslam.net for simulcasting this very podcast. We thank you guys for joining us here. And if you want to go ahead and check out, again, what I'm doing, according to Woods, is where you can find the podcast. But they're subscribed. They've actually been guests on the podcast along with Eric Bischoff and George Hermosa, a historic 5 to 6 hour episode with George Hermosa. But I could convince you to go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. They have already done it, but I guess let's do Zeta Zang. Zeta Zang will help convince you.
Hey, this is Zeta Zang. Make sure you subscribe to According to Woods